I was about 12 or 13 years old when Boyz n the Hood came out, and like a lot of people, I was really excited to see it. Unfortunately, there was no way my parents were letting me go see this in a theater. All the reports were coming out about the violence that was breaking out across the country. So I was just gonna have to wait for it to come out on video. My older brother went and saw it in the theater with his friends, and when he told me about it, I was really jealous. When I finally did get to see it, it quickly became one of my favorite movies, but to be honest, I was definitely way too young to understand the movie and just how important it really is. Today we're going to check out the filming locations for the John Singleton masterpiece, Boyz n the Hood. Let's go see what we can find. I'm on Woodworth Avenue, and somewhere right here used to be Lawrence Street, but as far as I can tell, a big chunk of this area was bulldozed and Lawrence Street no longer exists. But somewhere right over here was the alley that they walked down in the beginning of the movie to look at the crime scene. This red brick building right here matches up exactly to the one that we see in the alley that they walk down. The designs on the bricks are exactly the same. So somewhere right in this area is where that alley was. This here is Trey's school, although we don't see much of the exteriors. When Trey's mom is taking him to his dad's house, they pass right by this liquor store on the corner of Crenshaw and 54th Street. F&J Liquor, same exact liquor store all these years later. There it is, the home of Furious Styles, seen throughout the entire movie, starting with Trey getting dropped off here and immediately having to rake up leaves, going all the way to the end of the movie when Trey and Doughboy are sitting right there on that porch having a meaningful discussion. As you can see, the house looks very similar to how it did in the movie, aside from those bushes on either side of the porch. Looking down the street this way, this is where Trey would have seen the baby out in the middle of the street and ran out and saved it. Almost directly across the street from the Styles home was the Baker home, the home of Doughboy and Ricky. So much happens right here, hanging out on that porch, and of course, Doughboy and Ricky get into that fight right there in the front yard. Aside from being a different color and not having that chain link fence going around the yard anymore, the house looks almost exactly like it did in the movie. Instantly recognizable. Back there in that backyard, that's where they have Doughboy's coming home party. I would love to get back there and see if it still looks the same. This is pretty much the shot that we get of that final scene of Doughboy crossing the street and fading away. Doughboy's Impala would have been parked right here in the driveway. And across the street from the Baker house was Brandy's house. This is where Trey first sees Brandy when they're little kids. She's helping her mom bring groceries in. And then later on, Brandy and Trey sit on those steps while Trey's trying to convince Brandy to get with the program. As I sit here doing these filming locations, people have actually pulled over to take pictures in front of Trey's house. So that shows that all these years later, people are just as excited about this movie. These are the railroad tracks that they're walking along when they're on their way to go see the dead body. Right there where that house is, that's the lot that they would have been walking into. All those guys are hanging out right here in front of this apartment building. And when they leave, they're just walking into the parking lot of this apartment building. This is where he calls out to him and he throws him the football, and of course Ricky drops it. Right here, this is where Trey's hanging out in his fictional story that he's telling his dad about picking up the girl here on Crenshaw. Some of these buildings off here in the distance can be seen behind him. Notice this building here with that awning and the way this roof slopes down. All that can be seen in the background. Trey would have been somewhere about here when the girls pull up. All the artwork in the mural is different, but this is the spot. After Trey supposedly meets the girl on Crenshaw, he comes here to her house once her mom and grandma leave for church. The house looks pretty much the same as it did in the movie, aside from being a different color and having that tree right there in the front yard blocking the porch. But this is the house. Trey would have snuck out of one of those windows up there, running down the driveway and getting into his car that would have been parked right here. 99% of this movie was shot in the Inglewood, South Central part of Los Angeles, and most scenes were shot within a couple miles of each other. But for whatever reason, they came all the way down here to San Pedro just for 2 quick scenes. This is the house that Ice Cube and his friends are hanging out in front of when the man comes walking down the street and snatches the chain right off of Dookie's neck. Ice Cube would have been sitting on the wall right there. Now the house has changed a bit. In the movie, it actually only has a wall on one side. And we can see bits of this house. We see this house one more time a few moments later when the girls come walking by and Ice Cube calls out to one of them. Now after the man snatches the chain off his neck, they chase after him, and you kind of get the idea that they catch up with him right across the street. But in actuality, it's a good block or a block and a half before they catch up with him, right here on the corner of Grand Avenue and Santa Cruz Street. He crosses the street, tripping over a bunch of trash cans, and they catch him right here in between these 2 trees. Now this building here, of course, was not there at the time. This was the office of Furious, where Ricky and Trey go to visit him. Now I'm assuming once those metal doors are rolled up, the front of the building looks somewhat like it does in the movie. This is some type of a church or religious building now, and it seems like it's pretty much always closed. This is where they would have been walking into Furious's office. They stopped to check out the girl right before walking inside. Some of these buildings that we see in the distance as they're walking in are still the same. When they're sitting in Furious's office, you can see a preschool in the background behind them across the street. That's since been torn down and these apartments have been built in its place. Furious brings the boys to the intersection of 5th Avenue and 27th Street, supposedly in Compton, but not in reality. Where that apartment stands on the corner, that was the vacant lot where Furious gives his speech trying to give the boys some knowledge. This house across the street is where all the younger people are hanging out watching, eventually walking over to hear Furious's lecture. And then over on this side of the street is where the old man, played by Whitman Mayo, is hanging out and eventually comes over and joins in on the conversation. Crenshaw Square area, very famous cruising location. People have been cruising over here for many, many years. This is the spot where Ricky and Trey come to find Doughboy on Crenshaw. This whole shopping center here is new. At the time, it was a used car lot. Doughboy would have been parked somewhere right over here. They were actually parked right across the street from this building. You can see it in the background when they're parking. We see Trey pulling up with that Wiener Schnitzel right there in the background. Trey would have pulled up and parked somewhere right over here. That building over there on the corner, that was there at the time. That building and the Wiener Schnitzel is about the only 2 things that are the same right here on this block. Just about a block away from the spot where the cruising takes place on Crenshaw, this is where Trey and Ricky get pulled over by the police. This is also located right next to the mall where the finale of the movie takes place. That police car would have been parked right underneath that gumdrop shaped tree, right about where that truck is, and Trey's car would have been right in front of it. This was Soul to Soul Liquor, the liquor store that Ricky and Trey walked to. Of course, Ricky buys those lottery tickets, milk and chocodiles, his last meal. Now this building looks a lot different than it did in the movie. It's almost as if the building's been cut in half. But you can see right there where the front door was that they walk in and out of in the movie, and it still has that awning up there hanging over the front door. On the corner of 30th Street and 5th Avenue, this is where Ricky and Trey see Ferris sitting right here in this intersection, and they take off running between the 2 houses. Notice that pillar on this house here on the corner. Ricky and Trey are walking along the sidewalk here when they first notice Ferris looking at them. Right there, those are the houses that they break in between. Now this house right here looks a little bit different because in the movie it did not have that brick wall going around the yard. They go right down in between these 2 houses, and Ferris actually stops right where I am, and he looks down this driveway and sees them hopping the wall. Just so you guys know, this is actually a good 10-minute drive from where Ricky and Trey's house is. So yeah, definitely not walking distance to the market. And this is the alley where that scene takes place. Unfortunately, completely closed off to the public. Can't go down this alley anymore, but this is where it happens. Trey's walking towards where I'm standing right now. And there it is. I'm actually parked in the exact same spot where Ferris is stopped. Ricky would have been walking right towards me before he turns and runs away. And these houses across the street can be seen in the background behind the red car. And I gotta admit, it's actually a little heavy looking down this alley. Here at the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza is where that big finale of the movie takes place between Doughboy and Ferris. Now, it's hard to say exactly where the burger stand was, but it was located somewhere right over here between the Staples and that Wells Fargo. Right here's the spot where Doughboy stops for a moment before pulling up on Ferris and his crew. Notice that cement pillar right there with the stop sign next to it and these palm trees, all of which can be seen in the shot. So to give you another perspective, the burger stand would have been located over here. Ice Cube would have come from right where that van's pulling out of, and they're over here and they take off running towards that building off in the distance. They're running away somewhere in this direction because that building right there can be seen off in the distance. So I would say somewhere right out here in this parking lot is where Doughboy gets out and walks up on each of them.